So here's where it all began for Triumph, the TR2, a pretty rare car. Debuted in '53, replaced by the TR3 in '55, so there aren't that many of them around, but you know, the ones that are around are pretty much, by and large now, lovingly preserved. But if you're in the market for a 70-year-old Triumph, and maybe a TR7's just a bit too modern, TR3 a bit too common, you know, the TR2 is something totally different. And although it's really very old now, it drives in a surprisingly modern way. I've just been driving this one, and you know, it's actually easy to drive. Massive, great big, thin-rimmed wheel, you know, low-geared steering, and the trademark cutaway doors that let you wrestle with the steering wheel at full chat, you know, in that period way. Probably most of these cars by now have been restored. You know, you see the odd barn find still, and you know, there are still tatty cars coming back from the States, but by and large most of them have been restored to varying standards. This one is a particularly nice one. We've found it for sale here at TRGB. It's probably the nicest one I've seen, actually. But you still want to take a good look around it, don't you, and see what you're buying if you're in the market for a 70-year-old car of any sort, not just a Triumph. In true traditional Triumph style, you've got a separate chassis on these. The basic chassis lasted right until the TR4, really. It's a very simple ladder-style chassis, metal body, and the Vanguard engine, which, you know, you'll sometimes hear unkindly referred to as the tractor engine, because Standard Triumph made the engines for Massey Ferguson. They're actually different, so don't get sucked down that route. It's a bit like the Porsche 924 and the LT van engine, just don't get sucked in. Anyway, it certainly gives you all the power you need for the TR2. These were a 100-mile-an-hour car, so you know, by the early 50s standards, that was a fast machine. Like any separate chassis car, you want to consider the body and the chassis together, really, because the chassis gives the car its main strength, but you do want the body to be solid as well. The front end of the chassis does tend to get pretty much covered by the engine oil leaks, which, you know, you just got to expect as a 70-year-old British sports car. So the front end gets protected quite well. You've got something like 6 pairs of outriggers that hold the engine and the body and the suspension, and those all need to be really solid. You can crawl underneath and have a look. You can get an idea of how well previous repairs have been done. And some of these really original survivor cars might not be as good as you think, because they will have had a lot of repairs done over the years. And sort of back in the 70s, really, when, you know, the classic scene just wasn't as buoyant as it is these days, you probably find people did really hasty patched repairs, and, you know, they've probably gone unnoticed over the years under several coats of undercoat. Just tap it and, you know, scrape it and find out what you can about the quality of the chassis, and you know, a serious owner will be quite happy to show you around the car. At the rear end, you don't have the oil leaks of the front end, well, not so many anyway, so that's probably going to be the worst part of the chassis if you're looking at a rusty example. Just carefully check where the spring shackles mount to the brackets, because if that gets really rusty, the springs can break, obviously, and then the car's just going to collapse at the back. That's probably not going to happen on any, you know, decent car you see, but it's just worth remembering that it all needs to be solid. Of course, these cars are MOT exempt now, so one thing you might want to watch out for is that the spot welds don't start breaking apart around the front of the car, because it can all start to fall apart if it's not checked out. Most sensible owners do have the cars inspected regularly, and a solid car, it shouldn't happen, but it's just worth remembering that you need to check absolutely everything, really, on a car of this age. One of the best pieces of advice I've been given on these cars is to just slowly walk around them, and I mean slowly, and take a look at the shut lines. You're not looking for shut lines and panel gaps like a Lexus, but you want to make sure that everything looks right. And you know, it may sound a bit vague, but you can get a feel for whether the body's sort of sagging in the middle or not. You look at the way the doors sit in the apertures and things like that. And a car that's been badly restored, or indeed a car that's, you know, weak, just won't look right. It won't sit right. So you know, that's probably the best piece of advice I've heard, really. It's not that specific, I know, but you know, you just get a good feel for a car of this age by just slowly walking around it and seeing how the body sits. The reason you want to check that carefully is because often restoration involves separating the body and the chassis. Certainly an expensive restoration will be a body off job. You should really brace the body shell if you're going to do that. People weld reinforcements in and things like that. And if they don't do that and it's a weak, rusty body shell, the chances are it might just not go back together quite right. And of course, if you weld it up off the car and then put it back on the car, it might not be sitting properly. So that's why you would just want to check what's been done to it. And a lot of cars these days, they will have photographic restorations, so you can just see how it was done. You know, at some point, someone's going to have had to make the decision as to whether to take the body off the chassis or not, because it's, you know, it's a much more involved job, you know, than simply patching up the chassis from underneath. So, yeah, as much information as possible, really. One more thing on the body, just check inside the spare wheel storage compartment at the back here, because that gives you a good look into the rear end of the body shell. If it's a modern radial tyre, you might find it's a tight squeeze and you have to give it a good hard pull to get it out, because the space is designed for the standard cross ply. But yeah, it's a good way to check the rear end. The running gear probably less of a problem actually. It's pretty rugged traditional stuff. So we'll start with the engine. So what we've got here is the 4-cylinder wetliner standard engine, which served the company well for a really long time actually. As I said, don't get sidetracked by comparisons to tractor engines. Yes, there are some similarities, but this is a TR2 engine. As I said, it's a 100-mile-an-hour car, but the strength of the engine was really in its low revs torque. They're not a car that you scream, so that did help to prolong them a little bit. And yeah, problems should be obvious. You can get water leaks internally and externally. Expect a few oil leaks and things like that. But by and large, they are a solid engine, and a lot of them will have been rebuilt at least once by now. The main issue you'll have is probably working out whether any tuning work's been done or not, because you could get about 30% extra power, I think, and it was quite popular to uprate them back in the day. Of course, should the worst happen and you've got a problem with the bores, you can of course replace just the liners rather than having to have the engine block machined. So as a DIY proposition, it's pretty good in the finest Triumph tradition really. Oil leaks, you can expect them to come really from the rear crank seal, the timing cover, and as I say, they do help to preserve the chassis, although you don't really want a leaky old Triumph, do you? In standard twin carb form, twin SUs on the TR2, it's about 90 horsepower, so it's understressed really for its size, and it gets along pretty well. So underneath it you've got a modern style coil and wishbone front end with telescopic dampers, and at rear you've got the live axle, leaf springs and lever arm dampers. You've got very short wheel travel on the TRs, which gives them that trademark bouncy ride. It's just how they're designed, so don't suspect that it's been massively uprated or anything. It's just that is how they were designed to be. It's all pretty much straightforward. Like most of the Triumphs, right up until the sort of Herald era, you do have to remember that the front end needs greasing, the trunnions need greasing, and if not, you can end up with them shearing and failing catastrophically. Luckily, it only tends to happen at low speed with the wheel turned hard over, but I have seen it happen, and it can be disastrous, because obviously the car is immobile. So yeah, check whether that's been done, see if it looks like it's been greased recently, and just ask the owner whether they've done it or not, because anyone who knows their stuff on an old Triumph will know about that, and they will have done it. You can see that this car isn't entirely standard. We've got things like the aero screens here, which we just love. We really want to try these today. It's a beautiful day, and we've got a roll cage here, which it's a good idea, isn't it? I mean, probably looks better without it, but that's no good when you're dead, is it? So we've also got proper harnesses here as well. The TR2 didn't come with any seatbelts at all, so these Luke harnesses in this one, are pretty reassuring. Steering is a worm and peg system on these cars, and it can feel a little bit vague. I think it's in keeping with the style of the cars, and as I say, this big 17-inch steering wheel does make them actually easy to parking speeds and everything, unlike so many other older cars. But yeah, just be prepared for a little bit of vagueness at speed, because that's what they're all like, sir. As for stopping it from that famed 100-mile-an-hour top speed, TR2 was one of the first cars to get disc brakes as standard, so no worries about that. I mean, they're not as efficient as the massive discs you find on modern cars, but they do stop the car surprisingly well for something of its age. Again, it gives it a little bit of a sort of mini Jaguar flavour, a little bit of a flavour of the XK120 in the TR2, and I guess that's the market Triumph we're probably aiming for, because the 120 was that much more expensive. But they still have that feel that you get from the 50s Jags, where you could be doing 30 miles an hour on a winding country road and you feel like you're on the millimetre. So there's plenty of fun to be had. So inside, well, there's not really much of it. I mean, you've got 2 seats, some bit of carpet and some dials. And most of the parts are sort of standard Smiths and Lucas stuff that you would have found in loads of British cars of the period. So it's not hard to source replacement stuff if you need to. Trim bits, a lot of it is just bespoke leather-covered parts, and individual details you can get from Triumph specialists. The part support for Triumphs of all ages is absolutely tremendous. Most of it from stock, I think, as well. The roof, well, a bit like Morgan drivers, I think, the TR2 brigade don't really like to put the roof up unless it's actually snowing, but just check, it's a fairly simple canvas affair, just check that it hasn't got big holes in it, because they end up being left down for so long. This particular car doesn't have a roof on it at the moment because it's got the roll cage. Don't be frightened by a car with a tatty interior. They get left with the roof down so often that the elements take their toll, and as long as everything you want is there and present and correct, it's fine. It's nice to have it looking nice, but it's not a deal breaker if it isn't. So bear in mind, this is a 70-plus-year-old car. We've only scratched the surface of what could possibly go wrong with it, but like I said, a lot of them have been restored, and most of them have been restored really very well. So don't be too suspicious, and no one owns a TR2 by accident, do they? So if you buy a TR2, it's coming from an owner who's cherished it and probably doesn't want to sell it. So yeah, just check what you're buying is the real deal. Check all the documents and the chassis numbers and everything. Check any modifications that have been done, and enjoy it. you just won't get this much fun in a 50s sports car this side of, I'd say, a Jaguar XK120 or something. And TR2s aren't the cheapest TR, of course, but they are a lot more affordable than a lot of the 50s Exotica. And you can't fail to come back from a drive in a TR2 grinning, even when it's raining. If you want to find out just what good fun they are, elsewhere on the site you'll find me doing a road test of this very car on this lovely summer's day. I think we should have the whole video of him going back and forth. And people are like, who is that bloke? You know.